But if we know this is happening to us, then we can do something about it. I'm Heather Grzych, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrzych.com or on Instagram at heathergrzych. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. Rumi says, hey, again, the season of spring has come, and a spring source rises under everything, a moon sliding from the shadows. So I thought that was really interesting in these two poems, this idea of, first of all, that he's writing about the moon sliding from the shadows in the spring poem. And we just happen to be at this time where we've had a new moon and spring equinox and within one day of each other. So there's just this tons of energy about emerging into something, right? So like with spring, you have all this, he calls it the spring source. And you could start to see the little buds come on the trees and all these really fun and exciting things that the birds start doing. And you start feeling different. I don't know, like I walk around, I smell things, my senses become heightened in spring. And there's like this teeming energy that starts to build. And this new moon, it's dark, right? It's like the darkest time of the month and everything gets lighter from there. Right. So we're at this point where things are dark and things are in the beginnings of emerging. But then the big question is, well, what is actually emerging with this energy, with this spring source? What is emerging? So these two events are happening right now, and that amplifies a feeling of transition. And, it reminds me that despite the clock on my phone and my other devices on this laptop that I'm on, that there's another clock at play. There's another clock. And this other clock requires us to let our minds expand outward into the vastness of nature in order to see that we are just tiny beings in a larger world. And it requires us to listen deeply to our inner bodies in order to hear it. All this is happening in a universe that's governed by cycles, right? That's why we have these seasons that happen every year. We have these lunar events happening constantly. Even though this universe got these puppet strings that are being pulled, we don't know what pulls them, but we do know that everything's going into increasing chaos, or at least that's what the physicists tell us. So seasonal transitions are they're evidence that we cannot possibly control everything because there's something bigger at work. All this is happening despite of what I want in my tiny little puny life. What we want, which is like our desire, that's essentially what is within us that seeks to transform that desire. I want this thing because it will give me this. Our bodies are in a constant state of breaking down, rebuilding, regenerating, constant. And they're all trying to get back to this original blueprint, even though it may seem that we veered off course at times, sometimes more than others. But that's what homeostasis is. It's your body trying to get back into its true nature. And it will do what it can to get there, despite what the mind or society or environmental changes are going to do to take us off course. It's always going to try to get back to its true nature. This is one of the reasons that gender affirming treatments and surgeries are actually very disturbing to me. And I actually had a really good friend from elementary school, middle school, and high school pass away recently after going through gender reassignment. And ever since the treatments, she was constantly ill. her body was like this little girl and trying to change it so much. I noticed her voice getting deeper, but her body was swelling and inflaming. And she herself inside there somewhere, but there's a war on top of it. We all have our own little wars inside of us that are being fought. Our bodies try to tell us that this is not the way. They try to tell us that. They get inflamed. They have swelling. They have pain. And that can be very confusing sometimes because our minds might believe something is good for us. In fact, I was talking with somebody this morning who was like, I bet you have a lot of clients who are like super healthy people. And I think one of the things I've found through doing the work that I do is that people have their own definition of what is healthy based on their beliefs that have formed in different places. And sometimes we believe something is healthy for us and it is not, even if it was written down in some wellness magazine somewhere as being a quote unquote healthy thing, because something that's healthy is really contextual, right? Or like somebody tell us that drinking wine is good for our heart, right? So we do that every day. We drink a little bit of wine and then my liver's angry, or I have gout, or some other thing that might come from drinking too much wine. And I can't tell you how many people a year contact me because they want to cleanse like hormones out of their system or from the pill, or they did a fertility treatment and they want to get that out of their system, or they want to cleanse a mistake that they made 10 years ago out of their system. So we are transgressing against ourselves many times, and we don't realize it, that we're doing it because our brain is telling us this thing is healthy, or I have to do this because this. So this word sin came up a lot for me when I was thinking about what I want to talk about today. And it's a very sensitive subject for me, not just because like my last name actually means sinner. I don't know if you know that about me. My last name means sinner. It's apparently a word that if you didn't go to church that day in some like older version of Poland, what was there before Poland, the priests from the church would see all the people in town that didn't go to church, and the priest would walk up to that person and say, Grzych, Grzych, Grzych. And that was, you were a sinner. So I'm very sensitive about this word sinner, and also because I'm left-handed, but the idea of a sin could be like, what is it a sin against? Is it a sin against a person outside of you? Is it a sin against a culture? We are sometimes sinning against ourselves. There are sins where we think we're doing the right thing, quote unquote, right thing, and yet we're sinning against our bodies. Like, this is the right food to eat. This is the right job to have. This is the right time to have a baby. This is the right partner I'm supposed to have. So all these things that we think we're supposed to do right, we have to listen to the body because it matters, and regardless of what you believe God is, because, God or whatever you call that, which is bigger than us, or maybe you're an atheist, but maybe atheists, they even have their own religion, which is called physics. So we all have this sense that there's something bigger than us, even the atheists. There's something bigger than us that is larger than me, which means that I don't have control over everything. And maybe something else is fully in control of everything. Some people feel that. So we might feel that there's a peace in knowing that not everything rests on my shoulders. I can't possibly be the one in charge, So I feel peace in not having everything rest on my shoulders. But at other times, we might feel like we want more control. And so why do we feel like that? Why do we want to surrender more at times? And why do we want to get more control at other times? I want to think about something I want to have happen, and I want it to happen. I want to think about it. I want it to happen. Yeah, I want it to happen. I want to think about it and I want it to happen. So whether or not we feel like we have complete control over everything, or that there's something outside of us written in the stars that's making everything happen, I don't think that you fall into one or either of those camps. I think most of us are going back and forth between the two camps, like the camp of I control nothing and the camp of I control everything. And maybe it has to do with trust, because the less trust I have in that thing which is bigger than me to give me what I want, then the more I want to control. Or the less I trust in myself, the more I want to feel like something else is running the show. I don't want to be responsible for the shit show. I didn't do it. Something else must have done it. So I think a lot of us go back and forth between this. And this has to do with that whole debate of fate versus free will. And that debate is endless. That debate is endless until you realize that it's not a debate, that it's actually a relationship, that it's not an either or. And that relationship has to do with our ego. So you have an ego, we all have an ego. And on one side of your ego lies the material world and the physical world. That's one side of your ego. And on the other side of your ego is the spiritual world. And it's the job of your ego to gain form or experiences, states of being, to have an experience and to make actions for that part of you, which is spiritual. Maybe you want to call that your soul. Your ego helps you get this, right? This is how you have like life experience. If you want to have life experience, you have to have an ego, because if you don't have an ego, you don't have life. You don't have a body. You don't have form. We like egos because we're all here alive together, right? So we like egos. And on the other side, though, is the formless, which is the consciousness, out of which your ego has arisen and your being has arisen and everything has arisen. And that consciousness is on the other side of the ego, but it's also within you. It's not exactly a linear thing. You have consciousness within you. You also have consciousness outside of you. In one person, you have a lot going on, a lot going on. You're not just a conscious being or not a conscious being. It's like all mixed in there. You're not just like a materialist or a spiritualist. You're both, because you're in this constant state of building and breaking down. So by virtue of having a metabolism means that you're both a materialist and a spiritualist, because you convert, you build, and then you break down and let go of things. You're doing all those things all the time in your body. And, it's weird, in our larger life, want to sort of block that kind of energy from happening. We should be building and breaking things down all the time. I mean, you want a certain level of stability, right? But it's normal for things to be breaking down. It's normal for new things to be building. These things are normal parts of nature. So if you can transcend this debate of fate versus free will, you realize you are not in charge of everything, and yet you can still direct yourself and other things in your environment at any given moment. I'm going to pick up this temperature reader that I was taking my child's temperature with this morning. Just made a decision to do that. So you can lower your blood pressure with a longer exhale. You can drive your car to pick up food at Trader Joe's. So the relationship between yourself and that which is bigger than yourself can be observed, this relationship. And this is when you get back into your sensory body. So your sensory body is very, very, very important and is often overpowered by mind in today's culture. So if you're constantly being driven by your thoughts, your ideas, your beliefs, then you're not paying attention to the larger whole, to this relationship, because you need your senses. Your senses read the environment. They give you the information that tells you what is here right now. And if you are not spending time detecting that, I mean, your body's kind of doing it on a subconscious level anyway, and things are responding to the environment. But your conscious mind may not be. Your conscious mind and your awareness might be more interested in what's happening in your mind than what's happening in your senses. So you want to retrain to get back into your sensory body, so you're like more of a whole being. Because if you don't, your body's going to suffer, because you're unintentionally keeping it from responding to the demands of the environment. Unintentionally. None of this is like intentional. But if we know this is happening to us, then we can do something about it. And, this is really being on all these devices all day, that is sensory input, right? So that's why it's hard to sort of at that point delineate when you're looking at your devices all the time. Is that my senses or is that my mind? Well, it is both, but it's like your eyes are a very interesting organ because they're directly connected to your nervous system, more so than any other sense organ in your body. And so getting your energy back into your body away from these devices every once in a while is very important. And also realizing that things are always going to change. So it's your nature to have a nature, but it is also your nature to go through these seasons with slight changes, because nature changes, like the microbiome, the bugs in the soil change seasonally. The bugs in your gut change seasonally. The bugs in your gut change when you're pregnant versus when you're not pregnant. Like everything is changing according to these seasons and these rhythms of nature. And we have to allow them to change. We have to allow them. And, change does not come without risk, for sure. Especially when you're changing your body, it definitely doesn't come without risks. Like one time I lost 8 pounds and then I left my husband. That was not fun. It happened very quickly. It was a very fast change. I had some things I lost in that process. I lost my cat in the process. Not all changes have to happen that fast. Changes can be like earthquakes, really big, or they can be like little tides slowly moving, or they could be like the way plants move. Every day, a plant kind of nudges itself, through time and space slowly, so changes can come at different paces.
If you are embarking on a fertility journey and are ready to have your mind blown about what your body is really capable of and how it's impacted by the environment, then check out my book, The Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility. You can actually download the introduction to the book for free on my website at heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, Grzych.com. Read the intro for free and then buy the rest of this fertility enlightening book pretty much anywhere books are sold. I want to thank you for listening to this show. It brings me great pleasure to provide this content to you. I also want to let you know that I'll be making some very amazing announcements soon. And if you're not already on my email list, then I encourage you to go over to my website and subscribe to my email list so that I can keep you informed about these announcements that are going to be coming up very soon. So my website is heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, Grzych.com. And I look forward to getting these important announcements to you very soon and connecting. Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, Grzych.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.